Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm Carl, a member of the CK-12 team, and my colleague Katie and I will be running today's webinar, Advanced FlexBook Editing. We're so glad you joined us. We've had a great start to the 2018 Certified Educator Program this week. By now, many of you are experts at navigating the CEP Google Class to find assignments, resources, and using the Zoom features such as Q&A to ask the CK-12 team questions and chat to network and other educators. To honor the time that you are putting in, especially given this is an advanced session, we are going to get straight into our core content. However, please do not hesitate to ask us any program, Zoom, or other questions in Q&A as we go. And with that, let me introduce you to Katie.
Thanks, Carl, and thank you to everyone who joined us for today's session on advanced FlexBook editing. In our Getting Started with FlexBook sessions, we covered the basics, including finding content on CK-12, simple edits, and sharing your content with students and others. If you missed that session, I highly encourage you to watch the recording or join us next week for an upcoming offering of that session. In this webinar, along with a brief review of basic edits, we'll be covering the following topics: incorporating, formatting, and citing images. That includes our CC BY NC licensing, inline versus figure options, and adding attributions. Then we'll talk about embedding videos and CK-12 practice or quizzes, as well as other content. And then we will move on to using special characters and our CK-12 math editor, which includes using our drop-down option or LaTeX coding if you know how to use that. And finally, we'll talk about enhancing your FlexBooks using formatting, links, and added details, along with PDF versus on-screen views for stuff and details versus the resource tab for added clarity. Our main goal is that by the end of this session, you understand all of the options you have as you customize and enhance content on CK-12.
But before we get into our core content of the webinar, it would be great if we found out a little bit more about your knowledge of our editing tools. You'll see here a poll in a few seconds that will ask you about any customization you might have done with CK-12. What experience do you have using and customizing CK-12 FlexBooks? And you can select all that apply. I'm new to CK-12 FlexBooks. I've used CK-12 FlexBooks as is. I've made some basic edits. I've added images. I've embedded videos, practice, or quiz. I've linked to CK-12 modalities and outside resources. I have used the CK-12 math editor, and I've built CK-12 FlexBooks from scratch. So we'll give you a few minutes to answer here. About half of you have already replied, which is great. Keep going, and remember, you can select all that apply. All right, we're going to give you just about 10 more seconds to answer here. And let's go ahead and close the poll and see the results. We'll go ahead and share those with you. And as you can see here, 58% of you are new to CK-12 FlexBooks. About a third of you have actually used a FlexBook before. Half of you have made some basic edits. That's great. Added some images. So it looks like some people have some experience editing, but we're really glad that you've come to this webinar today to actually learn some of the more important features on how to make richer, higher quality FlexBooks.
Before we get into the content, just a reminder that core information for this session, like our other sessions, can be found in the session resource page. That is posted in the matching topic in the CEP Google Class, and we're going to link that in the chat window as well.
So with that, let's refresh a few points about basic customizing of FlexBooks. You'll see some of this again in this webinar as we work our way through, but we're happy to go through it if you have any questions. But we'll focus on the advanced components for this particular webinar. You can customize to start this process, or from your library, choose Create New Modality. Delete or reorder content. Add content via the menu within the editor or when browsing on CK-12. And finally, share content via URL, classes, integrated LMS, or Shareoplane. You can also assign content directly to CK-12, to Google Classroom, just like you would for CK-12 classes. Let's have Katie show you some of the components of adding new images to your FlexBook.
Thanks, Carl. Let's start by talking about the pop-ups you get when you want to edit or insert an image. So right here, we have two different screens that you get when you click on that image part. The first one is the general pop-up window, which allows you to choose the file that you want to upload it and also see the preview once it's been uploaded. The second tab is one that you definitely want to move over to understand kind of all the components in it. And that's super important because the last two parts down there, the source and the credit part, are where you're going to need to put any attributions for images that you upload. Making sure that you understand, if you look right above that, it says CC BY NC 3.0. We operate under a Creative Commons attribution non-commercial license. That means that anything that you're using, you need to attribute correctly. You need to make sure it fits under that license. And then you need to make sure that you're not selling any of the content that you're accessing on CK-12. And you're giving us full credit or whoever made that resource full credit as you do so. So definitely pay attention to those source and credit pieces. Above that, you'll see options for the type, figure inline, position, caption, alt text, all of those different pieces. And I'm going to walk you through what that looks like, but I just wanted to kind of show you these two images first so that you can see, in addition to the first tab that's opened up where you open that file, you need to click over to that options piece and fill out some of that information, even if you don't fill out all of it, just to make sure that you're appropriately citing everything you're including on our site. So I think with that, I'm going to steal the screen from Carl, and we are going to I'm going to open up my window and we're going to start playing around with CK-12. So let me open that and share. So here's our CK-12 homepage. If you log into CK-12, you might end up on the dashboard because that's kind of your first homepage as you work for. But I always find the CK-12 logo to be super helpful because that will take me back to that homepage that we're working with. So just that CK-12 logo up in the top left will allow you to do that. So let's say that I am teaching a life science class. So right now I'm going to browse through and then later on I'll search so you can kind of see two different ways of finding resources. But a lot of that was covered in the basics one. So I'm just going to kind of show you that as I go, but not spend a lot of time focusing on that piece. So if I decide I'm teaching a life science class, and let's say I'm working with a middle school life science concepts book, so I can open that book there. So what I did was I went to Life Science, I clicked over to the FlexBooks tab, and then I opened that table of contents. And I can customize this whole book if I want to work with it. So that customize option on the left side, and those are all things covered in that basic piece, so where I'm just kind of working my way through. But now let's say I am teaching a concept on animals. So we're going to talk about some animals in this one. And let's edit section 8.3. So if I'm editing from a book, I can edit directly from within the table of contents, and that's probably the best way just to keep everything cleanly aligned. So right here, this little pencil icon, the remove option is the X, the drag arrow option, so I can move stuff up and down, is right next to it. But the edit is if I want to actually go into the text itself and edit that text. So let me open that up. It's now going to create a copy of that in my library so that I can work with it. And I can leave it as is, or I can title it and say demo for 2018 Certified Educator Program, just so that for me, who demos all the time, I can track it. Now, here I'm in the editor modality, within the editor, within that read modality that we're working off of. And you can see your standard pieces that were covered, kind of that bold, italics, all those pieces. But we're talking about images right now. So let's actually just kind of go down and talk about some different images in here. You'll see a bunch of different ones in here. You'll see this option right here. I'm just gonna kind of play with this image for a little bit. So I could edit this image by clicking on it and choosing that image option. And let's just open it up and see what it looks like. You can see that there's a preview of what that image looks like. If I click over to the image options piece, it's noted as a figure, postcard size, there's a caption underneath it, some alt text, that's kind of if you hover over it and you wanna see kind of what that text would be. And then it has the source, so it has the Flickr page that it came from, There's actually 2 images in here, so there's 2 Flickr links in here, and then both photographers for the 2 different images. So that's cited cleanly. I know where it came from. I can always go back and check those links and make sure that it's under the correct licensing and we're good to go. But the first thing let's talk about is we can say, okay, this is a figure and it's postcard size. What happens if I make it thumbnail size? And then I save that. I'm just going to reinsert it and save it. It gets to be super, super small. If I make it, go back to this for a second, and I choose that file, oops, sorry. I go back to image options, and I make that figure full page size. It's going to make it full page based on the width of the page. So just know that everything's based on width, not height. So we'll see kind of what that might look like if I took, let's say, a vertical image here for a second and made that one full page. Figure full page. And all of a sudden it's huge. And if I actually print this out, it ends up taking up like almost multiple pages because it's so tall. So just make sure that you're basing your options on the width of a particular image as you work your way through. So let's say I was clicking in here and I wanted to insert an image. I wanted to reinsert this new one. I can click Insert Edit Image. If for any reason this is grayed out, it's probably because you're in a header or you're in a bulleted list. So those are special formatting that don't allow you to insert images into a header or images into kind of the same place. I know videos don't work in a bulleted list. You might be able to get an image to work depending on how you do it. So just if you need to, make sure you're clicked in regular text, then you can click that and I can choose my file. I highly recommend that you upload your image as opposed to going to a URL because URLs change all the time across the web. And so as long as you have the rights to do so and the rights to include it and you can download it and upload it, that will be a clean image that will stay there. So make sure that you choose that. I can then click on my image option and open it up. And you'll see right here, I see that preview. This is what it looks like. And now when I go to image options, I'm going to want to make sure that I cite this correctly. So these 2 images were pulled from Flickr, as I said. So I can go over to where they were. This says some rights reserved. I have to attribute it. So I have to give Katie Hunt credit for this. And I can click on this little kind of share option and get the link to share that. So however you're pulling your images, wherever they're coming from, if you made them yourself, whatever that looks like, you want to make sure that you are actually citing them correctly. So the source would be right here. I would put Katie Hunt, and then this is actually the other one there, so I could put that in as well, and I could pull the other resource. But so whatever I'm doing here, I want to make sure that I'm including that source and that credit for who did that so that I know that I've cited it correctly, it falls cleanly under my license, and anyone else who customizes my content doesn't have to worry about, is this image okay? Where did it come from? What happens there? Now, the difference between, this is kind of the last piece here, we talked about alt text, but the difference between figure versus inline is important. So inline, if I do this, I can actually type text kind of around it. And so I'm going to click on this again for a second. It's really wide. It's taking up way too much of my space. So I'm going to go back to inline, and this width says 800 pixels. So your standard page is usually about 600. So let's make it 400, and then maybe I can see it a little better. There we go. So now it fits within that piece. It is a pixel width, so it depends on kind of how clean your resolution is. But the biggest important piece of that is that a figure, if for any reason you are printing and downloading your customized book and using it that way, the PDF figures will bump to whatever place they fit best in terms to kind of maximize use of space on a page. So like a figure might be not exactly where you have it in the text online, but it might be on the next page. It's not that drastic a problem for something like this where it's a simple reference image. It would matter if the image that you're including is a graph for a math like question or something like that. So if you need the image to always show up directly under the text and you plan to use your book offline at any point, you're going to want to choose that inline option versus the figure options. So that's kind of the pieces that you want to think about as you're working through there. So we've talked about kind of, so I click on here again, I'm just going to choose your file as my recommendation as opposed to a URL. When you go over to image options, figures are fine for just kind of general pictures on your page or a figure that you can refer to. But if you want something to show up directly under your text, both on and offline, you need to make sure you're using that inline option. And as you notice, when I choose inline, the size and positioning kind of locks out, and I have the option to work with pixel width because I can put that anywhere I want in text. Once I switch back to figure, the pixel width disappears, and then I can have my 3 options for that small thumbnail, a postcard size, or a full page size based on width. So it's going to make the full page the width of the image as you work your way through. And then making sure that I'm citing correctly with whoever created those images, as well as the source that goes within there. So I think with that, we're going to pause for a minute and see what questions we might have and go from there. So it looks like the first question we have is, what do you do for a source if it's your own picture? If you upload the source yourself and it doesn't live on the website, then just give credit to yourself for what that is, and don't worry about that source piece because it's your own image. It doesn't kind of come from somewhere else. But make sure that you're at least crediting even yourself, just so that it's clear if someone else uses it that, oh, the author of this book made this image, they put it up there themselves, they published it under CK-12's license, I'm allowed to use it under that CC BY NC licensing. And therefore, I don't have to worry about it in the future. And they could cite the source accordingly kind of from that point.
Katie, one of the related questions about this is someone's made their own videos and wondering if they can embed that in a CK-12 FlexBook, and what are the copyright issues there, and kind of where's it stored?
So we're actually going to talk about videos in kind of the next section as we talk about embedding. So I'm going to show you how to do that piece. We don't host videos on our CK-12 site. So you're just basically embedding a video link to YouTube, and you would post them up on YouTube or kind of whatever other video site that you might be using. But so that's not something that's kind of living on our site. You're not uploading it onto our site. You're basically just embedding a window that goes out for that piece. Images, on the other hand, you can actually upload directly into here. So because you're hosting it on CK-12, you need to make sure that you're citing it accordingly and going from there.
Next question is, what about the picture ID? What's this about?
So the picture ID here, I'm going to actually cancel this for a second because it hasn't generated one. But for the figure right here, if I go back to here, there's actually a picture ID that was generated by our system. And what that means is I can actually link to this. So if I put text here that says, see the figure below, and then I can hyperlink this. So insert edit link, and I can actually anchor it to one of those figures. So that's kind of what it's coming up with. It's more of a, if you want to use that picture and you want to link to it and you want a kid to be able to click on it and then jump back up the screen to see something else, that's where those pieces matter. But it's not something that you need to worry about or fill in. You'll often see, like, if you open up an image that it auto-created an ID for you, just so it has something that it can work off of to generate that like link or anchor to that particular image if you wanted to link to it.
Another thing, Katie, if you can open up the image options again for this image. One thing that's interesting to note about the alt field is for our students with visual impairment, this is what they will hear when they click on the picture. So Katie mentioned that it's what you see when you hover over it, but also it's really good for our students who don't have access to the actual photo and need it described to them. So filling out this little section here is really useful for some of your students. All right, I think we're going to pause there then, and we're going to keep on learning. Remember, use the Q&A window if you have a question rather than the chat window, because we will be answering as much as possible the questions in the Q&A window. All right, so let's continue on. For now, we're going to switch back to our next topic of embedding with CK-12.
So I think we're just going to kind of stay right here. We're going to work on some stuff, but I'm going to continue to use this concept of animals. So let me close out of here. Just a reminder that I can keep this as a draft. Clearly right now I have pictures everywhere. I don't want people to see my updates. So I'm going to save this as a draft. If I click Finalize Draft, all of my changes will be pushed out to anyone who has access to my URL. Whether I published it, that would be findable in search, or if I've just shared the URL with my students, they would see those updates. I can always go back and edit and change it later, even after I've finalized it, but the finalize is for this draft. I want to push those changes out. Right now, since I'm still in the middle of doing 20 things, I'm just gonna keep that draft and save it in my folder. And you'll find that in my library, or you'll find it within this particular piece. So let's pick another topic within the same book. I'm gonna go down to, let's say 1023 is mammals, so more animals that we're talking about. And demo for CEP, just so that I can remove them and archive them out of my library when I'm done. And now I'm gonna work kind of through this particular piece. So if I'm working, we're talking about embedding media. So this is the case where if I click on any of these header pieces, you'll notice that I can't insert edit media in that header. I just need to make sure that I'm clicked into regular text, and now I have the option to insert that media. So we're gonna go down to this bottom thing. We have a green sled dogs. This is actually inside my editor. This tells me that there's some sort of media in here. So if I click on that and then I click on the edit media option, it will show me what this is. This is the human planet, Arctic green sled dogs. If I accidentally delete this for some reason and say, oh no, well, luckily I've already put the link right here. So we can just open this up. And actually I have it open here, but you would just find that particular piece. I can then, within YouTube, so as we said, we don't host videos. So if you hosted a video on YouTube or something like that, you would want to go to the share option. And then you would want to, you could copy this link here. So let's see if we copy this link and we paste it in here. It would auto insert that for you. So we've actually made it really easy for you to do that, where you're just pasting the link directly in there for a video. And then if I click on this, double check it, yep, it has the right video in there, I'm good to go. So one option is if you just paste a YouTube link into our system, it will auto embed that video for you, and then I can choose to remove that link or leave it there accordingly. The other option, just general good practice for embedding, is if you wanted to do this, I could close this, I could click share, and then I should have an embed option right here. And then this is your embed code. It gives you the width and the height that you're working with, but you can just copy that embed code. You can even choose a starting time if you wanted to for YouTube videos, and then it would give you that option. And it would start kind of wherever you wanted it to start. But I'm gonna copy that. I'm gonna go back to here. We're gonna remove this for a second. And then here, I'm gonna put media in here, and I'm gonna just paste this embed code. So this is important, whether it's a YouTube video or some other media, I can paste that embed code in here. I can see what it looks like, and then I can insert it in. So option A for YouTube videos is to just paste the link, and it will auto embed for you. Option B is to paste the YouTube in. And then if I wanted to save this, so I can finalize it or save it, I could see what that looked like, and it would actually show that piece in there. So I'm gonna do a couple other things first, and then we can kind of look at what this looks like. So another option is to embed practice. So this is the topic importance of mammals. So if I went over to CK-12 and I search for importance of mammals, or if I was on that page and I just looked for it, I could kind of link back to the concept page, but here's my importance of mammals option. Here's your nice little YouTube video we embedded in there. From this page, not from the practice browse option, but from the actual like card for practice, I can click into that practice, and here's an awesome option right here under this little ellipses option on the left. I can click that and I can pull an embed code. This means that I can take CK-12 practice and I can embed it in my read, or I could embed it elsewhere, because we're giving you that embed code to work off of. So I'm gonna copy that embed code. I'm gonna go back to here and I'm gonna say, okay, under my review, there's some questions. Also try this practice for this section. And then I would edit media, I would paste it in. You're gonna see if I preview it, it looks like the CK-12 practice, and we're good to go there. Now, one note, I am embedding this practice in the read, but if I assign the read to the students, I'm just gonna see that check like complete or incomplete if you're in any of our assignments option. If I want scores for students to do this practice, I need to also assign that practice separately to students. So just remember, if you're putting it within a read, you're giving students access to it, but you're not assigning it to students if you assign the whole concept for them, okay? And then finally, this is kind of a fun option. So we made a Google slide presentation of some of the dogs floating through the office at CK-12. And so if I wanted to share a Google slide presentation, I could do the same thing. So for Google, I would click File, Publish to the Web down here. And then right here, they have the option to embed it. So if I do that, once again, I would just copy the embed code. I would go back to that particular read. And for fun, check out these slides. And I could do the same thing again. Paste it in there and insert it. So I'm going to finalize this draft because I want to like actually look at it outside. We'll see if we can, this is going to bump me back into, if I save it as a draft, it usually bumps you back into the table of contents editor. If I'm finalizing it, it's now showing me what this all looks like. So you can see here, if I scroll down, I have that video I put back in here. I have the practice. As a teacher, I can preview it. As a student, they would actually do the practice. Or I could click on this link and jump over. I opened it in a new tab, and I could see that practice over here. And that's a great option if I want to then assign that, because I could assign it to class. And then finally, my Google Slides presentation, where we have a couple slides in here. So I could look at those options. Now, please remember that if you create a Google Slides presentation and there's copyrighted material in there and you don't want to share that outside of your class, this is probably not the best option for that, because you don't want to be adding copyrighted material into something that you're then sharing externally outside of your class for any reason. So just make sure that stuff that you're putting in here, you are allowed to share within CK-12. If you're uploading it to CK-12, you're doing so. But that's just kind of I've had teachers say, oh, but my presentations have stuff that I can share in class, but not outside. Then keep that link separately and go from there. So I think with that, we're going to pause for a minute and see what questions we have.
All right, Katie. First off, why don't we have a couple questions here about images? And Laura asked, just to make sure I understand, inline means the figure will move with the text if there's the page break, but the figure option means the image could be separated from the text. Is that right?
That is correct. So that inline image means it stays. So like, for example, right here, and for fun, check out these slides, that the videos aren't inline or whatever, but let's find you an image for a second. So right here, this is a figure. So if you're just using a digital version of this, it really doesn't matter. The figure gives you options for a caption. It's only when you're talking about downloaded options, like a PDF, actual printed PDF piece, that it would really matter. And that part would be the case where you would want to make sure that if you want that image to be directly with it, then you choose the inline option versus having it potentially bump to save space on text.
Great. And there's another one here too, which asks, what does the position option do?
Sure, if I edit this again for a second. Let's see, it's going to take a second to load. Your positioning, we can see what your options are there. I don't know that I've used positioning that often, so it's not something that I've gotten actually questions on at any point when I've demoed in the last few years, but let's see if we can get you an answer to that question. So if I'm here, this one is inline because it's showing up at the top. It's probably going to show up at the top anyway, regardless of whether or not it was a figure, because there's no text that's going to bump and change that. But here, if I choose this option, my position is normal, or I could left align it. So that's kind of your two options for there. Normal, kind of if you're doing a postcard, you're showing up as a figure within the general text. Usually I believe that's centered, or I could left align it. Now if I insert this, it bumps it over accordingly. So that's kind of one option to center. For an inline image, if I wanted to move it over, because it's inline, I can simply type text or space things before it, and I can move it over just because it's within the text itself. So I'm going to discard that draft where I just went through a bunch of stuff. We did have a couple Plix questions that came in about embedding pieces. Right now, our Plix are hyperlink only. So I'll show you a Plix kind of linking in when we do some more of the formatting pieces. But we don't currently expose an embed code for Plix. We have had conversations about that, so hopefully you'll see that down the road. But right now, you would just want to use the URL for that. We also seem to have gotten a lot of licensing questions. So our licensing is based specifically on Creative Commons attribution, non-commercial use. So that allows you to customize. If you look here, I'm going to open this again. If you have any questions, it's right here. I can click on this link. It will open up what that license is. It tells you you're free to share, copy, and redistribute the material in any medium or format. You must remix, transform, and build upon the material. And you cannot, so you must give attribution, and you can't use the material for commercial purposes. That's our license. If you have any questions about that, then I would definitely check that out, check our terms of use, go through that piece. In terms of what you can put under that, that is your responsibility to decide as you go through. So like right here, this image that I used earlier, I'm gonna close this for a second. Here, Flickr I love because they do a really good job listing exactly what their rights are. So this is some rights reserved. If I open that up, they actually link to the Creative Commons. This says attribution. I can share, adapt, I can do anything with it. I can sell it as long as I attribute it. There are no additional restrictions. So I could put that underneath there because I gave credit. We gave credit within CK-12, and there weren't any extra restrictions on that particular image. If you're choosing to use other materials in there, it is your responsibility as a user to determine whether or not it fits under the licensing. I've gotten 1,000 questions on, can I use this or that or this or that? And I was like, I have not read the terms of use of the 17 sites you just mentioned to me. So I can't give you advice on that particular piece. We can tell you what our license is, and then if you choose to use material from other places, you need to make sure that it fits under the license for CK-12.
All righty. Well, Katie, I think we're going to move on to the next section of today's core content. And I want to show you 2 short videos of teachers customizing FlexBooks to best meet their needs. So the first clip is of a social studies teacher, Jonathan Wood from Tullahoma, Tennessee. And the second is of Jessica Favela Casillas, who is a chemistry teacher in El Paso, Texas. So let me pop back over to the keynote. And we'll bring that up for you here.
My favorite thing about it is you can update, change content, adapt to what you need for that classroom. If I have some content on there that I think is not working, or the students don't like, or that I don't like, that it's just, for whatever reason, it's not working the way I thought it would, I can find other stuff and use other stuff to change those chapters and change the format of everything. I can also upload videos anytime I want to there, upload any pictures that I need on there, any other resources, as needed. So that's what I like the most, but I can kind of form it the way I want to.
We were asked to reorganize the FlexBook that was already there and adapt it completely to EPISD and our curriculum, our scope and sequence. We added things that were student-friendly, we added videos, and I think that was a really good experience because as a chemistry teacher, I knew what my kids were needing as far as a textbook, as far as content went. And I could rely on the textbook to have videos and interactives and any kind of visual that I thought they needed that they couldn't get in a standard textbook.
With that, let's move into CK-12's options for including special characters and math formatting.
So whether or not you're a science or math teacher, or you simply want to add extra formatting for special characters, our special characters menu and our math editor will allow you to do that. So I know some people have said, if I don't teach math, is this even worth it? You can do kind of that extra formatting piece using our math editor or a special character. I just want to point out a couple things, and then we'll bump into live to show you what this looks like as well. But this is our math editor. You can see that there are drop-down options. So if you're unfamiliar with that code in the middle part, then definitely use the drop-down options at the top. And you can always preview it to see what it looks like. And then we have that nice little how to use the math editor up in the top right that allows you to kind of pop out some extra directions that might help you as you work your way through. So let me share my screen and we'll go through that so you can see that. That was just a little quick preview. So now you can see my screen. So the first section that we did, we browsed, we went to life science branch, we found a book, we edited that book. Let's say I'm teaching something on genetics and I'm gonna search for Hardy-Weinberg. In here, I could see some different options. I could open this up for this particular read for grades 9 and 10, or if I was working in the middle school, maybe this particular read. So that's your option for searching. I'm gonna go back for 1 sec just to remind you all. I searched, and then if I was teaching 7th and 8th grade instead of 9th and 10th, I could limit my search by grade. I could limit my search by text or FlexBooks, all sorts of options. And then I would simply choose that particular section that I was working off of. So from here, I'm just doing a one-off lesson. It's not involved in a whole textbook. If you're working with editing a textbook, I recommend you start at the textbook level because everything cleanly kind of works within there. But if I just want to edit a read standalone, I can go to that particular read, click Customize. I'm going to just relabel. You do not need to retitle. I'm doing this, but I recommend retitling your book level at least. You don't need to retitle kind of all of the reads within there, but your book level for your school is usually helpful. So we're going to talk, zoom in a little so you guys can see this maybe a little better. We're going to talk about our special formatting and characters right now. So this is our special character option. So just like you would see in Word or Google Docs, you could add in, a degree sign if you were writing something about temperature. You could add in pi in here. That's somewhere else. And you can, here we go. And you could kind of use that special character to just get a quick formatting, our nice little registered trademark every time I write FlexBooks, all sorts of options in here. So that's pretty standard. Just know that it's under this nice little symbol and you can click special character. If you're curious what any of these mean, just hover over them and we have that text and information right there. So what I really want to focus on is the math editor because that has a lot of different pieces. So we can talk about Hardy-Weinberg model, and let's say I wanted to put a formula in here. So once again, you'll see I was up in the header, so I don't have that option. But if I switch back into regular text, I now have the options for all of my choices up here. And I'm going to click on my math editor. So if you know nothing about coding and nothing about math editor pieces, you just want to click into this little box and then you can start pulling from our drop-down option. So if I'm going to write an equation, I could say I want a function. I want that to be equal to something. And I could have pulled the equal sign from my plus equal sign right there. Let's actually do that. And then I can keep working from here. And I can say I need something to a power. So let's say here to a power, and I can just fill stuff in. So p squared. Now, I have some pieces here that maybe I want to change, other parts here. I could choose to just edit stuff here or up here. And if I start editing in the code box, I will lose all options to edit up above. So know that our drop-down menu works in one direction. It fills the code, but the code doesn't work backwards. So if I want to change stuff, make sure that's the last thing you're doing if you still need to drop down. And I can change this to there, and then I could click preview. So if I'm like, how does that look? Great. Okay, we got a code in there. 2 dominant pieces, I get p squared. I could write another one by scratch if I wanted to. But if you say, oh no, I messed up, I want to start from scratch, I need to know how to use the code, you can always start a new equation. I just closed out of that, click on the math editor, And a brand new equation will give you access to that drop-down menu. So just, if you want to just fix something quick, change a variable, you might be able to figure it out in the code. If you know LaTeX coding, by all means, feel free to just start typing directly in here. A function based on 1 dominant, 1 recessive, gives me 2 PQ, whatever that looks like. All sorts of options. But if you want that drop-down, start fresh, and you'll be able to access that piece there. Now, a couple other things. You can see these little options to tell you what these different things mean. So block math centers it on here. If I just click it, you'll kind of see what it looks like. It centers it on a new line. Inline is just in line with your text, just like the pictures we've been talking about. And align at will actually left align it on a new line as well. So some different formatting options as you're working through so that you have an idea of kind of different pieces and what that might look like. You can, if you're up here and you want to use just, you need a formatting, you could just say, okay, I want a fraction, but then you would have to know kind of how that fraction piece worked. So just know that you can use the parts on the code at the top, but if you want to see that, all those boxes to fill in with pieces, just start fresh. So if I get rid of that last part, because I don't want a random fraction after it, I can add that in here, and you'll see the nicely formatted math equation within that piece. Now, there's one piece to note. I've had some people use this for different options. They have done, actually, let's start with a fresh one so you can see the drop-down options. So if I go here, once again, it's that little X in the curly braces, and I start doing, you know, matrices, different things like that. I could just fill it in, 2, 3, 4. I can always preview that, see what it looks like. I can still work up here, equals, all sorts of options as I'm going through. I've had some people that do coding try to put in colors for text in here. Just know that if you're using print versions, there's a limited set. They're the same colors as what we have in the math editor. I'll show you that shortly, but just know kind of what you're working off of.
Katie, we're going to challenge your chemistry now. And Sarah's asking, can you show how to make the chemical representation of glucose? So let's see how we can type in the glucose. And my guess is there's some hydrogen in it, maybe some oxygen. I don't know. So let's see how Katie does and how we do this.
Sure. So since I have a bunch of code in here, I'm probably just going to start fresh to make this a little bit less complicated. So I'm going to click here, click on our math editor. I would say you might want to take a few minutes just to explore what all these options are. In addition to our superscript option, we have a subscript option. So that's going to be super helpful for you for this piece. And because glucose has a couple different parts, we're actually going to put 3 of these in here. And then we're going to start filling in. So carbon 6, hydrogen 12, oxygen 6. And then you can see that piece in there. So if you want that in the math editor, you are more than welcome to do that as is. I'm going to add that. You could, however, choose to just write that simply as text. So I could do C6H12O6, and then I can subscript, using our little subscript option up here, those parts here. So either option is fine. If you're writing it in text, it may be easier just to kind of put it in regular text. If you want it in a formula or an equation, then you would kind of do that part here, where you would actually use the subscript part within the math editor to give you those different pieces.
Great. So are we gonna, do you want to do a little more demo, or should we stop for questions now, Katie?
Let's take maybe a couple minutes of questions, and then we'll do the last part of our core piece, and then as always, we stay on for more questions.
So the first question is, how do you go to the practice and back so fast? I always get lost. So Consuelo needs some help on that.
Sure. So we had some practice pieces here. You have a couple of options. I'm going to finalize this draft for a second because it's going to practice while in edit mode is not super helpful, just because you're in the editor, and so you don't have the same options as you're working your way through. So there's a couple of options for practice. So if you're on a read that's already tagged to practice, and you're just trying to access practice in order to assign it or see what it looks like, I recommend just using the practice option in the top. So I could preview that practice, or I could assign that practice directly from that read modality. If you're accessing a read outside of the context of a book, it should be coming from a concept page. And you can always kind of see here, there's no other modalities there, but this all modality option on the top left, if I click on that, I can go back and it will bring me to what we call our concept page with all of our different modality types. So here there's a Plix, some practice, and the read as well for this particular topic. So when you're coming from a standalone read, just go back to that concept page and see the other modalities or view it at the top. If you're coming from a book, it's a little bit different. So let me just open up here. I'm going to go back to the book that I was working off of, because you probably want to see it for the one that I did that I had open in a tab already, just so that I could easily access it. But if I go here to my life science concept, and I think I was in chapter 10 something. Let's see if we can find that again. 1023, the importance of mammals. So here I'm in the section within a book. So it's a little bit different because it has kind of that, if you look up here, you can see your breadcrumbs. You can see that it goes from chapter 10, it's part of this book, it's part of a FlexBook in life science and science. So once again, if it's practice and I'm just trying to preview it or assign it, it's right there. Down at the bottom of our reads, you'll see other modalities. And I usually find it actually easier to click on a modality other than practice, because practice will bump you to the preview option. But if I click into here, these are all tagged to the same concept, and that will bump me to that page, and then I can click on all modalities. So that's an option to kind of work your way backwards. And now you can see practice, you can see the real world, you can see the section that you worked off of. So different choices. The kind of just one last piece, if for some reason you're not seeing parts in the bottom, under the details section of any of our books, we tag our concepts. So our original books are kind of multi-concept lessons, so you won't see a one-to-one correlation. But within any concepts book, each book should be tagged to a concept. So this goes from importance of mammals in biology. So I could just simply search importance of mammals. And then it's already in bio, so I'm good to go. If I saw maybe one for biology and one for life science, I could filter or I could pick the matching one. But that search would take me directly to the concept and all the parts that match, and you can see the read right there. So I think with that, we're going to do kind of the last part of our demo in terms of showing you some other fun formatting pieces that I love in our editor. So let me see if I can go back to the read I was working off of, which now that I've gone from here 12 times. Actually, let me not just use the back button. I'm going to go to my library. If I've edited anything, I can find it in my library. So instead of trying to go back 25 different times, this one we notice I finalized so I could see it. The first one is still in draft mode, but I'm going to edit this particular one. And here we can go in, we can click edit. Notice if I have the option to edit, it means I've already customized it once and it's living in my library. And that's the one I want to work off of if I'm still continuing to edit it. So we have some options here. I would like to, let's say we talked about a Plix. So I pulled up a Plix that had to do with inheritance and life earlier. I did this simply by searching for different topics and browsing within Plix. And you can do that by using the Plix icon on the homepage. So I just pulled this one up here just so we can see what a Plix looks like that might be related. And for right now, as we said, you're just going to want to copy this URL at the top. And then I could say, under review, maybe try exploring genetics more with this Plix. And I could either paste the code in there, or I could simply highlight the word Plix. Let's see if I can actually make that happen. And I can go up to the top part here, and here's my hyperlink option, and I can paste the URL for the Plix in there. Now, this is where if I was putting something else in, I was anchoring it to something else versus a URL, then that would be where I would start putting in figures. So if I remove this for a second, I could link it to something else. And I don't think there's anything tagged in here with images, so that's why it's not showing me those figure links right there. But if I insert this link right here, then I could use that and students could access that Plix directly. Another cool thing that I discovered like a year into working here as I was exploring something random that I love is what I call an element box. So in the summary, let's say I want to talk about maybe some key formulas. So I was a former math teacher for years, and every book I ever taught out of had like these blue boxes with key math formulas and science formulas and things like that. So that's exactly what this element box is. It's really a call-out box. So I could once again say, okay, here is your Hardy-Weinberg model. And then I could put, you know, a description if I wanted, or I could go back into the math editor and I could start putting in like pieces, either typing it directly or using our drop-down. And I'm not going to go through all the parts because I just want you to see what this looks like. And you can add that in there. So this would give you kind of that call-out box as you're working off of. In here, in Plix, we were talking about parent genes and offspring. So maybe I could put in a table for that. So insert table, just kind of your standard ones. So we could say, okay, if I have, you know, B and lowercase, what are my options here? There are some formatting options for tables. So if I right click, I could put a summary here, some information there. I can make everything, the table in line with the rest of my text. I'm definitely going to put a border, and my caption would be kind of the top part. So genetic modeling. And here, so we get B. You know, in this one, oh, I made this really boring. So let's make this a little bit more interesting. And as you're working your way through, you have some options. So you could put a table in there. We don't because we have the ability to convert our content into PDFs for customized content. We do have kind of some restrictions on what you can do in your table, but you'll see some options there. And then you see here we have kind of your number bulleted list. I could change that to letters. I could change that to, you know, Roman numerals. And I could actually increase or decrease this indent. So I want to take that list out. I want to put it back in. I want to get numbers back on there. So you have some kind of those standard options, or I could just make this a bulleted list instead. All sorts of options as we're working our way through. Let's say you just mess that up and you want to go back. We can undo a couple of steps there and go back to what I was looking for, or just your standard shortcut, Command Z or Control Z will get you there too. And then the last kind of piece that might be helpful here is right here is our definition list. So let's say I was going to put in a bunch of definitions, maybe under our summary, different pieces that I'm working off of. So I'm going to insert a definition list, and notice it already kind of tells you where to put the term and the definition. So let's say I wanted to talk about an allele, and then the definition would be the variant of a gene. I could go back down again, and if I'm within that term definition part, I can just use my indent to get it again. So I could say, okay, the next one is a gene pool, and then I want to indent and get the definition there, all the alleles of the individuals in a population, etc. Or I could simply hit enter, and if I was outside of that, I could put another set of term and definition in. So you can add more parts in there, or you can do different pieces. Those are kind of some of the little funky ones that you might be like, what does this do? How does that work? I want to show you two other tabs on here. One is the resources tab. So right now there's no files attached to here. If you create your own worksheet that goes with this or something like that, you will sometimes see answer keys uploaded in the resources tabs of chapters or whole textbooks. So those might be helpful. But that's where you'd upload files. Once again, making sure that if you're sharing something on here, it fits under our copyright. And then the last part is the details tab. And here is where I put a description, maybe some learning objectives. I could add vocab here that would show up at the end of the section if I printed it out, or just as a reference for students. And you'll notice that this already has all of the attribution information for anyone who's worked on this before. So if you change stuff, you can add your own name in there, but you want to make sure to keep that part in there, and then tagging. And then this key part, this tagging to Hardy Weinberg, is the part that you want to make sure that you have it's tagged to the original concept. And so if you wanted to add another concept to it, you could choose a different concept node. And I could search for, let's say, genetics or something like that. If I changed it, we could see other options that I could add in here as well. So I'm going to save this for a second. And we're going to go back to our other one, because I want to show you one piece just in terms of the chapters part. So if I go back to the book that I was editing, so I was editing this one within a book. So I'm going to edit this draft and actually finalize it. Oh, continue editing, keep this draft. I pulled it out of a FlexBook, sorry. So if I'm going to go into my library for a second, I'm going to edit the book as a whole. Those resource and details parts are in the chapter as well. So you can see resources and details for the whole book. Or if I edit at the chapter level, so here, notice this is a chapter level, and I click edit, I have all of that same information for resources and details. And then we had some questions about kind of adding and arranging chapters. So I'm going to answer those. So I can rearrange sections. I can rearrange chapters this way, just using those up and down. And if you want to go in between, you would just open two different chapters, and then you could drag stuff from one chapter to another. So I know we have some questions in here. I just answered one or two of them as we went. But I think we're going to kind of flip back to the couple slides that we want to wrap up with, and then we'll go back into any questions at the end. So I'm going to let Carl share his screen. And I just want to talk about publishing for a second. So a reminder that the publish option is on the left side for any book or modality. I would say there's not really any reason that you wouldn't want to publish it. All of the resources you're sharing on our site have to be under our license regardless. And by publishing it, you can easily access it and then add resources. You're adding to that community level that you're working off of. And if you're, creating it from scratch right now or customizing it, you might want to wait until you have a book that you're ready to publish, and that's totally fine. But definitely do that, because then it becomes available via search, and it's not until you publish it that you can add it to your school's page. So definitely, if you're working in a school where you're working with multiple subject areas and you're creating a whole bunch of resources for your students, you can make a school's page, and then students will easily find all those resources there, but they would need to be published to do that. And then just kind of one last note, accessing our tools and apps page, I always recommend going there, the FlexBook online and offline access, as well as our Sims in practice. Most of you will be customizing FlexBooks, so just a reminder, if you're in this session, I'm guessing, that to find them in the offline reader or the app, that you would want to open them in a browser and then open them from there in that offline reader or app.
All right, thanks, Katie, and to all of our participants joining us today. I know that it's almost 1 a.m. in Hong Kong, and there's somebody from Hong Kong here, so we gotta wrap this up for them. So right now, we'd like to go ahead and finish up, but we will be staying on for any additional questions you'd like us to answer. We shared at the beginning, but don't forget to check out the session resource page handout. We put the link to this resource in the chat window earlier, but you can also access it along with the rest of these resource pages inside of the CEP Google class. If you're looking to complete the Certified Educator program, you will want to fill out the assignment for this section. It is available in Google Classroom, and we suggest you complete it within 1 week of this session so that everything is fresh. A reminder that all assignments must be completed before the end of July. As we've noted before, we have one feedback form for this program, and we hope you'll use it following each one of our webinars. We've gotten some great feedback so far, both for what's going well and how we can make the experience better for you. And we'll contribute to incorporate suggestions this summer and in future trainings. This isn't mandatory, but you are requested to give us feedback. Then this form is available under Google Class under the feedback topic. Now that you know all about editing FlexBooks, we hope you continue your learning by joining us for some upcoming FlexBook sessions. Getting started with FlexBooks. If for any reason you missed this session, you might want to join next week or watch the recording of this webinar to fill in any gaps and get some general ideas for finding and using FlexBooks. The Common Core Math on CK-12 webinar is coming up. For those of you who teach math, you might be interested in our webinar showcasing our new Common Core Math resources, including our interactive algebra and geometry Common Core books. Even if your state has its own standards, you might want to join us for this session to see our newest interactive content and then customize it to meet your state's standards. CK-12 platform for non-STEM users. For those of you who are interested in what CK-12 can offer outside of math and science resources, the CK-12 platform for non-STEM users will show you how to customize FlexBooks that other schools and districts have created, as well as to create your own books from scratch. Since you all attended this FlexBook session this morning, you might be especially interested in a bonus webinar we are hosting next Monday, July 16th. CK-12's CTO, Miral Shah, will be previewing CK-12's upcoming release of FlexBooks 2.0. While this doesn't count as one of your 5 mandatory live sessions, we do encourage anyone with interest to attend. And remember, everything that you're doing to create FlexBooks now will be available in our new FlexBooks 2.0. So keep working right now. If you haven't already done so, join our Jumpstart for Educators Cafe and start getting involved in networking with your coworkers. We've had some great questions on how others might use CK-12 resources in their classes, and we really encourage you to ask your colleagues in this program how they might be thinking of using CK-12 or have already used it in their classes. You can also join the conversation by liking us on Facebook at CK-12 Foundation, or by following us on Twitter, once again at CK-12 Foundation, or using the hashtag CK-12 Certified. Thank you so much for joining us today. We will continue to stay on right now and answer any questions coming in, but you're always welcome to email us with any questions if you have to go or have more questions down the road. So at this point, we say goodbye to those of you who need to leave us, and we will stay on. And Katie, it looks like we do have some questions still.
Thanks, Carl. So I'm going to share my screen again just so we can play around with a few things. We had a question about arrows between products and reactants. You could look at the special character options for some pieces to put arrows in there right now. If you're looking to try to do it in a formula in the math editor, I haven't gotten that question before. You can put it in here, but it looks like one of my colleagues has, so he's gonna pull it up for me in a second. But in the meantime, let me try to answer another one about superscripts and subscripts before a letter. You can do the same thing. You actually, if there's something, I would say, if there's something that you're not seeing in the math editor easily accessible, just shoot us an email because we do update this sometimes, kind of adding in more pieces. I know we've had some letters that we needed to add in because they were commonly used. Basically, if you're doing this, you can see that's kind of a subscript. And if you look at this, that's a superscript. So you could put one before the other one and kind of play around with it as you're working your way through. You would just kind of skip that first script. So if you need a script before, so if we said, and you want it before that as well, so let's see if I can do this and kind of play around with it. So I get a superscript here and a subscript there, and let's see if I can make this work. And if not, then what I would say, that one's coming after that. I would need this again, and then 2. So you got kind of those two parts there. I can see if we have an option for it as well, but I'm going to let Carl take that one on the arrow piece.
Sure. Share.
Yeah, we can't hear you.
All right, we're changing windows here. I want to show you this. I'm not a big LaTeX guy, but I have learned enough to get me by. And so here's an example of a command that's not represented above here in our kind of automatic way. And I just Googled just now when we got this question, and I found that there is something called long arrow. And indeed, it makes this beautiful long right arrow, and you can have a long left arrow. And, LaTeX is a really powerful kind of type programming language. And I didn't need to learn much to figure out how to get the right arrow there. So for all the chemists that need these equations, it's really easy to go add those in, and you don't really have to learn much of the LaTeX language. So just wanted to point that out. All right, Katie, another question?
We have some questions about labeling for maps or images, so I'm going to share my screen again. But once again, yes, LaTeX coding works really well for there. If you're seeing something that you think would be super useful across the board, definitely let us know, and we can talk about getting that into our math editor as options as we work our way through. So labeling for maps or images, so you have two options. You could upload an image that already has a label on it. You would use kind of a Photoshop or something like that to create that particular piece. But otherwise, if that figure option is there, so I'm going to I know this has nothing to do with this piece, but if I upload the image I was working with before, I'm going to upload that one that I have easily accessible. And then in my image options, I would put the caption. I would put lion and dogs. So if I'm trying to just put a label kind of for the image as a whole, then that figure option would work, and you can see that I have a label there. If you're trying to label on the image itself, we are not a photo editing tool, so you would want to do any of those pieces kind of external to CK-12 and then add them within our particular read. We had another question about the math editor. I would say feel free to explore this some. There are notations for lines, rays, and angles. You can find them in one of these. Let me see, I think it's here. And yeah, so if you're using something, it's been a while since I've been making equations in here, but you can find different parts within that particular piece. So just kind of explore what's there. If you think we're missing something that most people would be using, let us know. And we are going to go from there. So we had a question here about details at the bottom. So I'm going to go back to the details and the concept node. It's just concept. So as we talk about concepts within CK-12, we talk about them as kind of that bite-sized chunk of kind of skill set or topic that we're working with. So this one is on Hardy-Weinberg in life science, and you could browse for other pieces. But don't worry about the word node. It's just the concept that you're working off of. So we have some questions about GeoGebra. I know that GeoGebra has embed codes, so you could try using that. That would probably be my best option if you're creating GeoGebra. If that is a licensing question, you would have to check with GeoGebra's license and double check that, because as I said, there are too many different pieces for me to begin to answer licensing on there. And then let's see what other ones we have out here. So we have another kind of, I need to add superscripts and subscripts before element abbreviation. I think I'm going to walk out of this webinar and go talk to our team that built that and see if we can get that added in there, because I know that that is probably something that a lot of people need. I'm actually surprised we haven't gotten that request. And then we have some questions kind of about more images. So if we change the image on the cover of a FlexBook, I assume we also need to cite our source and give credit to the photographer. You could do that in the description. So kind of, here's my description. You could put a little note there, or you could put it in your text as well. But yeah, that is accurate. You would want to cite that somewhere on that text so that there was a record of where that image came from. And then we have a great one about kind of that publishing in schools page. So if I'm going to just open it up another tab so I don't lose that. So CK-12 here. If you go down to the schools thing, so remember you have to be signed in as a teacher to access the schools page. But if I go to schools, I could view my school. Let's see, I could kind of pick one here. And this little claim your school option gives you kind of the directions, but really you can just email support at ck12.org if you look right here, and then give them the information, basically what your name is, what your title is, because we want to make sure like one person for the school or district is in charge of that page, and then the school phone and website, and that way, as well as the name of the school, that way that will give us the information kind of that we need to set up that schools page. Through that one. So I think we're down to maybe one last question at the bottom here. So while editing and adding a formula, I found that the font is too large. It looks like someone took care of that. And so if you're working within there and you need to change different pieces, you can kind of adjust different components within different choices, but that gets still a little bit complicated within there. So if you're having difficulty doing something specific, then I would definitely feel free to email support and we can walk you through any options for that. But as we said, I think we have a question about Google Classroom. I'm going to just open up the CEP Certified Educator Program page for a second. This is our Certified Educator Program page. You should be, if you're logged into one of our classes. This is the Advanced FlexBook Editing section. So we're going to click on that. You can see the description of the session. You can see attached resources. So the very bottom one is our session resource page if you don't have it already. This is your assignment. If I click on the assignment, I could click on the form directly there, but if you open it up, this form will open up the kind of actual assignment, and you're just going to fill this all out. When you get all the way to the bottom and you click submit, you will get a confirmation screen. As soon as you see that confirmation screen, back in the assignment, you can mark this as done. Because it's a form, it doesn't automatically mark it as done. The marking it as done is just for your own records so you can kind of track what you've done and you go from there. So that would be the piece if you're trying to do the assignment. Make sure you go into the matching topic, open the assignment, open the link, and then mark it as done for your records as soon as you've completed it. So I think that takes care of your certified educator pieces. We have one question about how long we'll have access to the Google Classroom. It will definitely be available through this summer, and then we'll probably take the material out there, share it on our site. The videos and stuff we'll make available elsewhere, but for now you'll have access through this summer to finish your work and go from there.
Well, I think we are finished up for this session on advanced FlexBook editing. Hopefully now you'll all run off and start creating some great content to share with the world. So we thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you either this afternoon or tomorrow. Take care.